Cool. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the People's Housing Project's community conversations and educational events. It is October 12th, and today we are talking about the Black Panther Party for self-defense, their theory, their praxis, and like what we can learn from them for the housing justice struggle in 2022. Part of the reason we are doing this tonight is that the party was founded on October 15th, 1966. So that puts us 3 days away from the 56th anniversary of the founding of the party, which is pretty great. So I am going to play a short clip, about 10 minutes or so, from a documentary called The Murder of Fred Hampton. In it, the former deputy chairman of the Illinois party talks about, explains why he joined the party and kind of gives a basic outline of what they believe in. And I think it's really important for non-Black educators, especially when we're talking about like Black revolutionaries, to let them speak in their own voices, especially if we have like recordings, video and audio of the folks who were there and did the thing. So in that spirit, I'm going to go ahead and play 10 minutes from this documentary. This was filmed in 1971, just before Fred Hampton was assassinated by the United States government. The Chicago police and the FBI killed him for the civil rights work that you see him doing in this clip. So without further ado, here this goes.
Deputy Chairman of the state of Illinois, Black Panther Party, Fred Hampton. I have the pleasure now to introduce who I believe is one of the baddest motherfuckers in the world. A man that did something that a lot of us ought to be very glad that he did. He was a part of making the only party which exists in the United States today that represents the people. As a matter of fact, he was one half. Him and Huey P. Newton started out in 1966. Sometimes I think where some of us were in 1966. I think what we would have said if we'd heard about some niggas going out in the street talking about carrying some guns, fighting all them policemen because we didn't know they was pigs out there in the streets. And I think I'm speaking for the whole party of the state of Illinois. I know I am. When I say that we love Huey P. Newton, we love Elridge Cleaver, we love Bobby Hutton, we love the Black Panther Party, and we love Chairman Bobby Seale. We love them because they were the first ones that took a stand against capitalism and racism and said that we'll fight it till the end. We said we join the line somewhere, motherfucker. If you try to pass us, we'll blow your brains out. They were the first ones that came through with the program that was initiated for the benefit of the people. All those things that I named, the reasons why we love them are reasons that make it beneficial to us. But let me simply say when I'm introducing Brother Bobby, that we love him because it's lovely to love. Chairman Bobby Seale.
We here for some jive conspiracy. You know what we gonna do? We are going to defend ourselves because Huey P. Newton said that power is the ability to define phenomena and make it act in a desired manner. Power is the ability to define phenomena and make it act in a desired manner. What kind of phenomena? Social phenomena. What is the social phenomena? Black people, Mexican American, any kind of people begins to learn that the social phenomena is that in fact U.S. racist, decadent, capitalist, imperialistic America is a police state. That a police state exists here, that these pigs are doing nothing but protecting the avaricious businessman and the demagogic politician, protecting the exploitative system that they got going. That in fact we are tired of it, we are sick of it, you've been brutalizing black people, you've been murdering and lynching them, black people are tired of it. black people vanguard this revolution all of a sudden, and it's phenomenally correct also, but we are concerned with that social phenomena. We are concerned with that exploitation. We are concerned with the oppression that black people and all other peoples in the world who are suffering the same common oppression that we are suffering today. The thing is that we have the ability to define it. So, if we have the ability to define it, the only next thing to do is get organized. Get organized. So when a pig walks up to you, or a pig gets to jive with the people, you be so organized, you be learning some tactics, you be learning some revolutionary principles, you be having some guns hid out somewhere, you have some proper tactics. That when the pig gets to jiving with you, the pig gets wrong, you whoop your guns out on him, blow him away, and then you have the ability, in fact, you have made that pig act in a desired manner. But for what? But for what? For a new system, brothers. We need a new system. The people need a new system.
I sat yesterday afternoon next to Bobby Seale while he said that a federal marshal tried to ram a 4-inch piece of cloth gauze into his mouth. 3 marshals held his head. 1 marshal held his nose so that he couldn't breathe, and the 5th marshal attempted to press against his mouth with all his weight this gauze that ultimately resulted in Bobby bleeding profusely around the mouth and the lips as they tried to jam this piece of object into his mouth to silence him.
I'm so thirsty for revolution. I'm so crazy about the people. We're going to stand together. We're going to have a black army, a Mexican-American army, an alliance and solidarity. We're going to have some progressive whites, all of us. And we're going to march on this pig power structure, and we're going to say, stick 'em up, motherfucker. We come for what's ours. Up against the wall. Power to the people. Thanks, brother.
When they got together, Bobby Seale, yes, they got together with guns, and there's nothing wrong with that, because we need some guns. Black people need some peace. White people need some peace. And we are going to have to fight. We're going to have to struggle. We're going to have to struggle relentlessly to bring about some peace, because the people that we're asking for peace, they're a bunch of megalomaniac warmongers, and they don't even understand what peace means. And we've got to fight them. We've got to struggle with them to make them understand what peace means. Bobby Seale is going through all types of physical and mental torture. But that's all right, because we said even before this happened, and we're going to say it after this, and after I'm locked up, and after everybody's locked up, that you can jail revolutionaries, but you can't jail a revolution. Right. You might run a liberator like Harris Cleave out the country, but you can't run liberation out the country. You might murder a freedom fighter like Bobby Hutton, but you can't murder freedom fighting. And if you do, you come up with answers that don't answer, explanations that don't explain. You come up with conclusions that don't conclude. And you come up with people that you thought should be acting like pigs, just acting like people and moving on pigs. And that's what we've got to do. So we're going to see about Bobby, regardless of what these people think we should do. Because school is not important and work is not important. Nothing's more important than stopping fascism, because fascism will stop us all. We're going to see about Bobby, because Bobby came and saw about us.
When I saw that he had 16 pieces of adhesive tape strapped across his mouth, when I saw the gauze around his head, when I saw that his ankles were strapped in leg irons to his chair and his hands handcuffed to his side, I knew that we would unite in this country to stop this outrageous criminal Nixon stampede over elementary human rights. we will free Bobby Seale and we will stop this trial.
A lot of people don't understand the Black Panthers Party's relationship with white mother country radicals. A lot of people don't even understand that word that Elrich uses a lot. But what we're saying is that there are white people in the mother country that are for the same types of things that we are for stimulating revolution in the mother country. And we said that we'll work with anybody and form coalition with anybody that has revolution on their mind. We're not a racist organization because we understand that racism is an excuse used for capitalism. And we know that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people. And we're going to have to put it back in the hands of the people. Everybody in the state of Illinois is going to have to be involved or even around the revolution because we're going to have one. And we're going to have to do more than talk. We're going to have to do more than listen. We're going to even have to do more than learn. We're going to have to start practicing, and that's very hard. We're going to have to start getting out there with the people. And a lot of times we think we're better than the people. That's an insult and that's criminal. It's going to take a lot of hard work.
Come on in, little brother. Come on in, little sisters. Y'all can sit down and get something to eat.
Sisters and brothers.
Y'all take off y'all coat. We need some more cups out here. Sit down, man. Everybody gonna eat. Y'all can eat as much as y'all want to. Right on. Who want a plate? You want cereal? Who all want cereal? 1, 2, 3. Who wants cereal? Raise their hand. Anybody want some milk? All right. Whose milk is this over here? Well, drink it. That's good for your teeth, man. It makes your teeth strong. Who left this milk over here?
That's what the Breakfast Children program is. A lot of people think it's charity, but what does it do? It takes the people from a stage to another stage to another stage, and any program that's revolutionary is an advanced program. Revolution is change, honey, and you just keep on changing. That's what we do. We take the people in there and take them through those changes, and before you know it, they are in fact not only knowing what socialism is, they don't even have to know what it is. They're endorsing and they're participating and they're observing and they're supporting socialism.
Oh, you finna go to school now? All right. Right on. All power to the people.
That's the people thing. Socialism is the people. You're afraid of yourself. If you're afraid of socialism, you're afraid of yourself.
Cool. So I really like that entire 10 minutes. That whole documentary is amazing. And but I really like that introducing 10 minutes for a couple of reasons. One, I really like the way that it lays out both the theoretical background of the Black Panther Party and also like gives you a really clear look at the material activities as well, because these are not guys who are just getting up in that church and talking about socialism. Like Fred Hampton said, like, we're going to have to do more than talk, learn. We're going to have to do more than learn. We're going to have to go start practicing, and that's very hard. And you see them out there, like one of the examples of their outreach programs, that Breakfast for Children thing. And as he says, like, it's not a charity program. The idea is to use it to change people, both by getting them involved and by meeting their needs, to advance them towards a higher stage and teach people, like, through their very activity, like, what socialism is, and to get them participating in it whether they know it or not. So the Black Panther Party, just like a brief history, like Fred Hampton said, the party was started in October by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale. Bobby Seale was up there talking. He was the one who, he was the second speaker who talked about capitalist America as a racist, decadent, police state. He and Huey Newton founded the party in October of 1966. Bobby is very much the outgoing, charismatic speaker, and Huey is the theoretician, the thinker, and also the genuine tough guy. Huey's a law student who taught himself to read at the age of 18. And he and Bobby start this program where they come up with this idea that Black people need a political vessel for their own liberation. They come up with this idea that there is no way that nonviolent resistance doesn't work, and that someone needs to pick up and kind of carry the banner of Malcolm X. And that someone needs to defend the line of liberation by any means necessary, that Black people need to be willing to be engaged in their own armed self-defense, because then, just as today, Black people were disproportionately targeted by police, disproportionately likely to be brutalized by police, and disproportionately likely both to be killed by police on the scene of the crime, and also to be tried and convicted and given the death penalty all over America in that day and age. So they are responding to the genuine needs of their community. And one of the big beliefs that Huey Newton gets from Mao and from Marxism is the idea that you go and you meet the people where they're at, that you find out what the people need and then you go and do it. One of the biggest needs in the Black community at that time is safety from the police. So Huey starts a police the police program, because at this time California is still an open carry state, where as long as you are not pointing the firearm at someone, you can be openly carrying a rifle or a shotgun, and it was perfectly legal. So what Huey and Bobby and their first recruit, a 17-year-old named Bobby Hutton, did is they legally got guns, and they would find cop cars, and then they would follow them around. And when the cops would pull Black people over, Huey and the Panthers would get out and just stand off to the side with their guns. And Huey would start giving legal advice to the people who got pulled over, informing them of their right to remain silent, informing them of their right to an attorney, and informing them of their right to not incriminate themselves. So what they are doing is their first activity is providing on the ground material, both material and legal and emotional support to people who are being targeted by the police. It wins them a lot of friends, as does their next big action, where they go down to an interstate or an intersection on what is now Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in Oakland. And it's an intersection that is a high traffic intersection. The Black community has petitioned the city government of Oakland to give them stop signs, and the city won't give them the fucking $200 or $300, in the budget that it would take to put stop signs in there. So Huey gets some fucking stop signs, and he goes down there with a hammer, and he hands Bobby his gun, and he goes, "I'm going to put a stop sign up, and if anybody tries to stop me, hold him up and don't let him go." So they put stop signs around the intersection and reduce traffic fatalities and win more support within the community. So that is the vision for the Black Panther Party. They write a 10-point manifesto that is basically what we want and what we believe. What you got, Cameron? You should turn on your camera if you're going to talk, though. Hello.
Okay, so do you think it's like crazy how we kind of have this ability of people we have this reoccurrence of people trying to hold police accountable in a very much less violent way? I feel like the rhetoric of nonviolence has kind of won in that, that platitude way of being like, we shouldn't do violence, so people are using their cameras to try to hold people accountable. This was like in the resurface. This was the start of the Black Lives Matter movement, right? It was this idea of holding police necessarily accountable through showing their direct actions, rather than this kind of identity of violence. And people are getting the same, not the exact same, but similar hostility from the police. That if you come up too close to somebody and tell them their rights, or if you come up too close with a camera, police can say that you're like interfering with their with their thing. And I think that a large part of that is due to what happened and how the police have kind of made it so it's illegal to kind of try to help people and try to actually do activism in that way. But there are still elements of like people who try to do activism and they're like, hey, I know getting arrested by the police is scary, but it's going to happen if you do direct action like this, and you just have to let them take you. Um, and that's like a big part of like why people are like, hey, if you're going to be marching with people and you're white and you're an ally, you should be getting in between the police and black people, because it is more common than not that in that transportation that something happens, that black
Yep.
person is going to get either severely harmed or killed in some cases.
Yep.
It's insane that there has been cases, I don't remember the name of the person, but
Freddie
where
Gray, they nickel righted that kid in the best. So that's what the nickel riding is, what the Baltimore police used to call throwing somebody in the back of the van, and they're handcuffed, and you're supposed to put them in their seatbelt when they're in the back of the thing. But a lot of times, what they would do is they would beat the shit out of them, throw them face down, handcuffed in the thing, and then drive the van all fucked up. And they broke
yeah,
Freddie Gray's. Like Freddie Gray already had a broken neck, and they did that, and they killed him. And that was
yeah,
that
exactly.
was
And that
2015.
literally that was years ago, that wasn't a long time ago. These things are like reoccurring trends, and we see reoccurring similarities, and that's just so wild how that kind of happens.
Yeah, well, I think it's like it's because the systemic root of the problem hasn't changed. Like Fred Hampton said, like racism is a byproduct of capitalism. So as long as you continue to have this capitalist system, there's an incentive for there to be, and for the system to continue to perpetuate that racialized underclass that can do labor as well as serve as the social outlet for the rage of the white proletariat, because it's not the masters or the bosses that are the problem, it's the minorities. And if you can just blame them for the problems, then like gun violence isn't up because white people are also poor in Portland. Gun violence is up because black culture or gang violence or whatever. You know what I mean? And even though the majority of the gangs that I've met on the street have been fucking white gangs, like when you hear
Literally.
yeah, like literally, like the when you hear gang violence and the way the media makes it sound, it's always like, oh, it's the black gangs and it's a cultural problem. And I think the main reason why you see the phone thing is twofold. I think it is both because part of the way, as spoilers for the end of the Panther story, their militant activity gets cracked. Like part of the reason California is not an open carry state anymore. Let me rephrase. The reason that California is not an open carry state anymore is because the Black Panthers did an open carry demonstration at the California state capitol, like 50 feet from Ronald Reagan. And when he was governor of California, they passed the first gun control act in like the first big piece of gun control legislation in California, and it was a ban on open carrying long guns in public.
Which is
So,
crazy because that is now like seen as a democratic thing, right? A
yeah, and it's like
Democrat,
and that's
a
like what you
liberal
have to do.
thing.
It's like normal, like to be in favor of guns. So like,
Well, it's like for safety, but it was right wing people who had done it because of the threat of like
yeah,
black power.
yeah, and black people exercising their constitutional right to self-defense, and that's the way that Huey Newton looked at it. It's really funny because in like they talk about Huey go like, because like there's like when the other books talk about Huey recruiting for the party, and it's like, he just went to bars and pool halls where black folks hung out and talked to them about the party and recruited them. And like and then you read Bobby Seale or David Hillier, like the memoirs of the Panthers, and he was doing that with a shotgun across his lap. So he's like in the pool hall sitting there drinking a beer with a shotgun, and people would be like, why do you have that? And he would be like, bro, why don't you have one? Like, it's your constitutional right. Do you trust the pigs to be the only ones with guns? And it's like, oh yeah, that's quite a conversation starter and quite a persuasive tool to have. So he's not just like sitting there being charming and friendly over a beer. Like he's living and embracing his entire philosophy, which I think is incredibly powerful. And like, anyway, so to go back to the phone thing, like, so one, like, because that right has been taken away from people, and also because of the incredible level of violence that the Panthers faced for that. I think people especially white people logically realize, hey, if I have a camera, not a gun, I'm physically safe, and also I can like impose some level of surveillance power on these police, right? I do think it is also like, I think Americans, especially like as you get urbanized and technologized, you get moved away from the reality of physical force, right? Because you expect the city to be safe. You don't expect to have to physically fight for your own safety. You expect your locked doors to keep you like, nobody ever expects to have to like have a knife fight for their life. And in the country and in rural situations, like people like where you have a farm and like there's just bears and shit and cougars, like you just kind of have a gun to keep yourself safe because you never know and you're far out, and it like, what's the harm in having the thing and knowing how to use it? And that culture is gone. So people like don't know how to fight, and all they really know how to do is kind of watch and surveil. And the hope is that that level of surveillance will create political and social pressure. But you know, it's, they tried to arrest Huey Newton at gunpoint and take his guns, and Huey said, pig, if you touch my gun, I'll blow your fucking brains out. And the cop tried to arrest him and snatch his gun out of his hand, and Huey fucking killed the dude and was in jail for 3 years facing murder charges, and ended up walking because it was like he ended up walking on an appeal because there was self-defense and sufficient reasonable doubt, and he went free. But that level, like, if somebody had like, part of the reason those cops who killed George Floyd are in jail is because somebody was there with a fucking camera. And if there had been armed Panthers there, I don't know that that guy would have gotten away with kneeling on that dude for 9 minutes. I kind of think that if everybody there had guns, somebody might have done something about that sooner or later, especially if there was a group pushing that kind of militant self-defense, which, you know, once upon a time there was.
Yeah. I think also there's an element to where that force of like the terrorism of police has gotten like stronger. I think in the element,
Oh yeah.
like how we are in this element of like racial capitalism, definitely shows that underclass of Black people. But also there's that drive and need for that exploitation of prisoners.
Right.
Yeah, that came. So it's not only this incentive of like, oh, let's, you know, marginalize poverty, but also let's criminalize actions. Let's make it so there's the 3-strike rule. Let's make it so
Well,
almost
and
any.
all that starts as a response to the Black Power movement and as a way to disarm the militants, because like that's the reason why like the people who coined the term nonprofit industrial complex call it that, because it's supposed to, they're like, this is the other side of prison, because like their way to get rid of and disarm the next Black Panther party is, okay, for the ones who have got like, so you have a nonprofit industrial complex where the intelligent, like, as Huey Newton went on to go get a doctorate, like Elaine Brown has a doctorate, many of the people who were leaders in the party went on to become luminaries in society after their radical party was dismantled and destroyed from underneath them.
Yeah.
Like, these people were brilliant, and so they set up a nonprofit, so the next, like, so they buy off the next generation and say, hey, you can work for the good of your people within the limits of the system, and the people who can't be bought off, those are the people who get sent to prison. And so you have this strategy to co-opt the ones who can be bought off, and then to destroy the ones who can't, and it's to physically isolate and destroy them, and it's horrifying.
Yeah, and all of that as well with gentrification within those Black communities. You know, Black communities definitely used to have that power of being relatively close to each other, but like
Right,
we can,
all within the same proximity.
yeah,
Yeah,
all in
like
proximity.
segregation itself produced this like isolated concentration of folks who shared a similar consciousness.
Yeah, but now it's the same issues of like poverty areas, but rather than having it be kind of in one space, it is sent across the collected like city, like the city of Portland used to have albina. Is that
Yep.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
used to be the area where like it was Black communities, and then the gentrification of that area was to renovate to where those people who were in that community could no longer take up that space. And in that, it pushes them out and it kind of destroys that sense of community.
Yeah. 100%. And so, yeah, absolutely. And all of that is kind of it is very interesting because yeah, nothing ever changes. Nothing ever changes because the same issues and demands that the Panthers had is like when it comes to housing, right? Like point four of the 10-point program is we want decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings. We believe that if landlords will not give decent housing to our community, then the housing and the land should be made into cooperatives so that our people with government aid can build and make decent housing for the community. And we still do not have decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings today. Like, and that is part of the problem. So like when there was malnourishment, and that's part of why we build these emergency shelters with the fucking housing project, because it's like building them on public land is not technically legal, but it is a form of nonviolent resistance, and it calls into question the fundamental idea of who gets to decide what fucking happens to public land. Is it up to the city and its armed cops, or is it up to the public who is actively making use of this fucking empty space, especially when there is no shelter? And the point of like providing these shelters from a community standpoint is like teaching the community its own power, and also like Fred Hampton said, trying to lead people to a higher state of consciousness through getting them active in the concept that like housing should be a human right. And the more that we can act like that and live that and build that today and make people really conscious of that, right, the better off we're going to be. And that's what we have to do if we're going to recruit people. We can't just stand on the side of the road and be like, we need socialism and the police are the problem. It's like, okay, and then what? Like, who's going to keep us physically safe? And it's like, well, that's fun because spoiler alert, we're all going to have to learn how to keep ourselves safe. It's going to be a collective effort.
Well, I think there's that element of like showing people what is socialism. You don't just say the ideas of socialism and then the benefits and state it in a utopian sense. You give that direct action. You give that direct praxis of the theory of socialism, like with the schools having food for children, having as much food as possible for the children, and showing that that need being met is the center of the idea. Whereas capitalism is the center of the idea is to simply gain money, any way possible. The center of socialism is to meet your needs any way possible. Any facet that you need, those needs should be met. And like I think whenever we are doing like this housing thing, it very much amplifies like how people are like, oh, you guys are kind, and it's like, well, we're not like doing this out of like kindness of like, well, I'm just, even though like nature is fucked up, it's because we directly are opposed to how the state is handling things, and we want to show people that outside of the state there can be actually uplifting things and needs being met.
Yeah, and like the kind of world that we can build with just community funding. And imagine if the resources of the entire fucking capitalist system and the entire mode of production were devoted to that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think it is also, I think part of it is that it's important to remember it's like, these guys, like it's the frame, like this framework didn't come from nowhere. Like Huey Newton didn't just wake up and come up with all of this himself. Like he read Marx and Franz Fanon and Mao Zedong and Ho Chi Minh and thought a lot about Black people's position in world history as well as in contemporary revolutionary philosophy. and far more than Huey Newton's used to say that, he's not a Marxist because a Marxist is somebody who believes uncritically that Karl Marx did, like, looks at him uncritically. But
Mhm.
Huey's like, insofar as like Marx's philosophy of like dialectical materialism is what we use to build this party, then sure, this is a Marxist and Leninist party, because that's what has shown itself to be successful in overthrowing capitalism. And it's a philosophy that points the way beyond a capitalist framework. And in order to have a revolution, you have to have a revolutionary philosophy and like a theory of revolution. So like when you see like in the old Black Panther papers, or you hear like people in those speeches talk about the genius of Huey P. Newton, like it's not, he's not some special magic guy. He's just a guy, he's a person who read philosophy. He's like a guy who, like, was the son of a black preacher who lived in fucking Oakland, who taught himself to read at 18 and figured it out because he read theory and tried to apply it. And it's like not anything that any of us can't and aren't doing.
Yeah. I just there's like the pacification of the masses is really there, whenever it comes to um like ingesting like social media and stuff like that. Like the internet has placed such an interesting directional change for social movements as well as capitalism. But you're still seeing the same veins of that late stage capitalism show up that were kind of being expressed.
Well, yeah, because it's like there's no, the system adapts, but the fundamental essence of extracting value hasn't changed at all. And it's not gonna, because it's a structural problem. It's a structural problem, and there's no escape from the structural problem. There's no escape from structural problems without changing the structure.
Yeah. And it's interesting how like much more pervasive it's becoming. And by that I mean like ingrained, right? We already knew that it was ingrained in the social institutions, but in a lot of ways, like on social media, like in the way that we're getting commodified through the content that we like, the intellectual content that we create, like we are becoming a commodity.
Right.
Um, and how inequality is beyond what it was in the Great Depression. It is
Hmm.
beyond, and it seems as though there is this very like um balanced thing that is tipping side to side, and people are like, oh, I wonder why that's happening, without even showing how people's conditions are fundamentally just getting worse. They're
Yeah.
just, people's lived conditions right now are getting more and more worse. They're
Yeah, they're objectively worse than they were in 1966 in a lot of ways. Like,
yeah, like gas, like the price of living and people's need to just focus on that is so draining, um that we're seeing these effects, and it's interesting to see where we're going to go from there.
well, our only two options, like it comes back to that, there's a quote of like, it's the future is socialism or barbarism. And it's like, okay, our future is Star Trek or Mad Max. Like we can all be like hanging out on the Enterprise with enough, and the point of like, we've moved beyond the need for profit as like the driving force in society in the way that Picard says. Also, fun fact, Patrick Stewart plays Lenin in a TV miniseries. So
I think I've seen him
he's
as Lenin.
he's two great communist leaders, Jean-Luc Picard and Lenin. Um,
Literally.
but it's like that Star Trek future, or it's the Mad Max future of like poor people scrabbling, and then a fat monster on top of a mountain being like, do not become addicted to the water. Your like for the water makes you weak, as he's like sucking in that fucking poison thing, and like while everyone else is starving. Like, oh, it's horrifying.
How do you think that like people of the Black Panthers party would react to things like police lives matter and the blue lives matter, the blue line, and those kind of imageries that we're seeing now?
I think so. Like one of my favorite parts is like at the beginning when Fred Hampton's like, I think about like where we were in 1966 and how what we would have said if we had heard about two brothers who, had stood up and fighting all those police because we didn't know they were police because we didn't know they were pigs yet. And it's like, I think that, one of the biggest, so the Panthers are the ones who coined calling cops pigs. And I think that that is 56 years later, you still see the resonance of that because it's like, oh, the police are animals. They are less than human. Look at the way that they fucking act. And it hasn't changed. And I think that especially when you look at the amazing cartoons that Emory Douglas drew for the Black Panther thing, I don't think they would have a hard time I think Huey would be not surprised in the slightest by the ideological project that the police are on, and I think that there is plenty of satirical material to work with. I also definitely think they would have had a YouTube channel, at least until they got kicked off. At least, yeah, I think Fred Hampton would have had a YouTube channel at least until he got kicked off of YouTube. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Caught the ban. I think Huey would be on Twitter until he got the ban hammer from Twitter.
that's fair. All right, cool.
Cool. All right. I want to end with one last clip because this is my favorite. This is one of my favorite little speeches of all time.
Awesome.
And we'll let Fred Hampton close us out.
Perfect.
I want you to know that I want you to say, if you ever think about me, and if you think about me, niggas, and if you ain't gonna do no revolutionary act, forget about me. I don't want myself on your mind if you're not gonna work for the people. Like we always said, if you actually make a commitment at the age of 20, and you say, I don't want to make that commitment because of the simple reason that I'm too young to die, I want to live a little bit longer, what you did, you did already.
You have to understand that people have to pay the price for peace. If you dare to struggle, you dare to win. If you dare not to struggle, then goddamn it, you don't deserve to win. Let me say peace to you if you're willing to fight for it. Let me say it in the spirit of liberation. I've been gone for a little while. At least my body's been gone. You ain't got to repeat after me. At least my body's been gone for a little while. But I'm back now, and I believe that I'm back to stay. I believe that I'm going to do my job, and I believe that I was born not to die in a car wreck. I don't believe I'm going to die in a car wreck. I don't believe I'm going to die from slipping on a piece of ice. I don't believe I'm going to die because I got a bad heart. I don't believe I'm going to die because of lung cancer. I believe that I'm going to be able to die what I was in the thing that I was born for. I believe that I'm going to be able to die high off the people. I believe that I will be able to die as a revolutionary in the international revolutionary proletarian struggle. And I hope that each one of you will be able to die in the international proletarian revolutionary struggle, or even be able to live in it. And I think that struggle is going to come. Why don't you live for the people? Why don't you struggle for the people? Why don't you die for the people?
So yeah, I hope that you all get to die in that struggle or that you'll get to live in it because that struggle's already here. Power to the people. Thanks for being here. Support the People's Housing Project if you can. Death to capitalism.